Okay, we're up to Siman Ayin Reish Beis, Seif Dalet. So Mekadjin Al Yain Lovon. We're talking about all the different wines you can make Kiddush on. Says the Mechaber, you should make Kiddush, you're allowed to make Kiddush on white wine. Ramban post le Kiddush afil b'di'eved. The Ramban says that even b'di'eved, you should not use white wine. Aval mavdin, but you can make havdalah on it. Minhag ha'olam kasvar rishona, that we allow to make Kiddush on white wine. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Yud, L'kul alma mitzvah lechatchila lechazach hayayin odim. That it's certainly preferable lechatchila to try and find red wine. Ela de'im ein lo odim, but if you can't find red wine, or it's not considered superior, and that if you've got superior wines, which are nice white wines, then that would be okay. But lechatchila one should try and use red wine. Av mavdilin olav, says the Mishnah Berurah Dalef, imhu chamar medina sham. You're allowed to make havdal on it. Medin, not wine, medin chamar medina. Shahakol sheisin oisa, because everyone drinks it. Vatam deloi garim sheikha is no worse than sheikha, than beer and things like that. To kaimelon lekamam b'simin reish salivov sifbeis mavdilin olav, that you can make havdalah on it. Imhu chamar medina, if it's chamar medina. V'hu adin to mitam zeh mutar lekadesh olav b'shachris l'kul alma, and therefore on Shabbos morning, where Kiddush is drabon, and therefore we allow that. Lefi shemashe kosu achronim lekam b'sivtes to b'shachris nagin lehakel lekadesh al kol mashke shu chamar medina. On Shabbos morning we will makel, and we allow chamar medina. So therefore this white wine would certainly be okay. Kasvar Rishayna, we are noig not like the Ramban, who passes it afil b'di'eved, and therefore if a person wants to make Kiddush on white wine, then that would be okay. If it's very white wine, we should be choishish for the Ramban not to make Kiddush on it, only really in extenuating situations where you haven't got white wine. So in short, you are allowed to make Kiddush on white wine. Better to use red, and so too grape juice as well. And certainly if the wine is meshubach, then that would be okay. Yain chai, if it's raw wine, literally, afilu muchazok the dari, even if it's considered very strong, and that the dari pirush sheroi lehmozeh, that you dilute it, al chad plasmaya, where you've got one portion of wine and 3 portions of water, mekachin olav, you make Kiddush, you're allowed to make Kiddush on that, even though it's very, very strong wine. But it's better to dilute it so it's just more drinkable. So long as it's diluted properly. And our wines nowadays, says the Ramah, better not to dilute it. They taste better with undiluted. Says the Mishnah Berurah Yosef Lemozgo, Sif Cotton Yud Gimel, Hainu shehu mitzvah min amuvcha, that it's better, it's preferred to dilute it. That means you shouldn't make it too weak, you shouldn't dilute it too much. That if a person dilutes it too much, or there's a sweet wine and it's just not really, it's like syrup, it's not really considered wine, and you make a bopra gofen on it, then, and it tastes like water, then it's a bracha vatala, ve'ein yotzim yidei kiddush, and you're not even yotze kiddush. It's like making it on like a Coca-Cola or syrup or something. So the question is, how much can you dilute the wine? So if you look at note 13, he says, v'af b'yamenu, there are some wines, even nowadays, which are very strong, and they can be diluted. You've got to make sure that it retains its sort of status as wine. You can add a third, so if you've got 2/3 wine and 1/3 water, that would be sufficient that it still has a din of wine, even nowadays. But you've got to know your wine. Some wines are stronger, some are weaker. He says you can add even 50% water. And if you've got very strong wine, then you can add 3 parts water to 1 part wine, so long as it it retains its status as wine. Then he adds in the brackets, tasting, you can't, how do you know if the wine is strong? You assume, you just taste it, and if it tastes very strong, then it's got a din of strong wine. However, nowadays that's not always it's not foolproof, because it adds some chemicals and things which will artificially strengthen it, so therefore tasting it is not necessarily a good siman. So generally speaking, the point is you can add water to wine so long as it retains its sort of feel and taste as wine. According to Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, you can add 1/3. If you've got 2/3 water, you can add 1/3 wine, and others say even up to 50%. You can add 50% of water. Okay, good. Let's carry on. Vov, yain simukim. You can make wine out of raisins. So you take some raisins and you pour water and you let it ferment. So mekachin olav, that's okay. Raisin wine is okay for Kiddush. For hu sheyesh boin lachluchis ktsas below shriya. So long as there's a bit of moisture in it, or even with that. In other words, the raisins are a bit moist and they're not sort of just totally shriveled and dry. There's got to be a bit of moisture in them. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sivkot and Tezvav Tzimukim Hainu Shenasa Yain Me'anovim Shnitztamku. That means you're making wine out of grapes which have dried up, i.e. raisins. Bein Shnitztamku Meichama Ali, they told us, whether they've dried up from the sun or from artificial heat, light, or a flame. Even though for nesachim purposes, in the Beis Hamikdash you can't bring it lechatchila. Mikol makom lekiddush kasha. For kiddush purposes, raisin wine is okay. And in fact, some people do that on Seder night if they make raisin wine lechatchila. V'ofen asiyason hu, if they've got medical reasons or whatever it is. V'ofen asiyason hu, and the way you're making it is shelokech hatzimukim. You take raisins, v'koishon, and you crush them. V'noisen aleim mayim v'toises, and you add water and you let it ferment. And you leave it for 3 days, then it has the status of wine. Mekachin olav, kosav v'sefer b'chershar, t'lefi ma shemevu le'el b'simen reish daled, si'if hei b'haga, de'echod mishisha yain b'mayim. You add, the wine is 1 part, and then you add 6 parts water, vadai bottle, then it's no good. You've got to add so many raisins, but you've got to make sure that at least 1 out of 6, 1/6 of the total is going to be raisins. Because if you've got fewer raisins, then it's not really raisin wine, and it's water, and therefore it's a bracha levatala. How you call it smukim yain, because it's no different. If you imagine all the smukim, the raisins are actually wine, so you can't have less than 1/6 wine. So too the raisins, they can't be less than 1/6. Because of the masharon is goydlat smukim, you measure the volume of the smukim commotion is havu achashenofchu al after they've swollen because of the water. V'lo b'shas nesinosim b'mayim, not when the water was initially placed on them. And he says the other way around. On the contrary, you measure the volume of the raisins when you initially put the water in, not when they're bigger and swollen afterwards. Because surely the swelling is going to be because of the water that is absorbed. So long as the result has got a taste of wine, yayin mikri, then it's considered proper wine, and you can use this raisin wine for Kiddush. And that if it's more than this ratio of 1/6, then it's not going to be good. And our wine generally has this, and therefore there's no problem. When you add the raisins, they've got to have a bit of moisture. If they're so dry and no moisture comes out, even if you press them with your feet or with a beam, just by soaking it, and you don't even make a ber pragofen on it. Okay, let's just do one more sif. Zayin. So again, in short, just raisin wine would be okay. You can add one, so long as they're at least 1/6 of the total, and then you leave them. You sort of add water, leave them for 3 days to ferment, and then you'd be okay. But they've got to taste a bit like wine. Zayin, Shimre Yain, if you've got sediments or residue, the grape skins, and you add water to that, if you can make a berpragofen on it, then it's good enough for Kiddush. Says the Mishnah Yudches, there it discusses which type of sediments and residue and grape skins you can make a bracha of Kiddush, make berpragofen on it. Okay, say that.